Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Fleeting Thoughts, an altered TCG podcast, part of the Maindeck podcast family. I'm Dan.
And I'm Jordan, and we will today be continuing our lore series, diving into some Lyra lore and stories today.
Yeah,
I'm pretty excited.
This has been one I've been looking forward to because the Lyra are they're just kind of interesting folks. They're just some wild souls out there, Jordan. I want to, before we get into it, so altered is where are we at now? We're at next month, actually, is when Kickstarters will start to deliver in Europe. And then Gen Con is, wow, Gen Con is just 2 months away.
It's right around the corner.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. Yep. It's coming. It's coming fast. Gen Con will have cards in our hands in the US. And then in August, our pledges will start to be delivered. And then the game releases.
Is it mid-August or late August? I couldn't remember.
I think it depends on your location in the world. Mid to late August is probably where to expect if you're outside of Europe. And then September is that global release date. So we actually, I have a teaser, but we have some spoilers that will be showing off a little later this month, which I'm very excited about. And then, yeah, then we'll start seeing. The whole set should be revealed by next month. Obviously, we'll have the whole set. This is altered, so I mean, all of the commons and rares, and
as much that can be revealed.
Yeah, whatever can be revealed will be revealed, and then we're gonna really be
in spoiler season for eternity as we rip open packs and see what kind of cool uniques.
Talk about never-ending spoiler seasons. People like to make fun of like Magic the Gathering right now because they're in a constant state of spoiling, but this game, you literally will always be seeing new cards.
Wild. It's gonna be super excited. I'm very pumped about it. I'm excited to start on my battle pass like journey every week.
Yes. Yeah. We gotta figure out when we're scheduling these events too. That's gonna be a whole other thing. But so as we get closer to launch, we're gonna start having some more content showing up for Altered again. It's gonna be kicking out there. We're gonna continue the lore series on this podcast. But as we get up to the sort of like Gen Con region, I think we're maybe gonna have to take a break from the end of the lore series, because there will be probably too much to talk about as the game is launching. So I haven't done the exact math on this, but
there's a non-zero chance where we can get them all done before that happens, assuming we stay on track.
It's just going to depend, I think, on the news of the day.
Yeah, like I was say, depending on the leading up news, it might be break. But if there's no huge news drops, we have 3 more sessions before the weekend of Gen Con. But like you said, I have no doubt that leading up to the big launch and big release coming up, that they're going to be doing all kinds of crazy news drops, which will be exciting.
I mean, regardless, we'll have this all done before the retail launch. It's really just going to come down to like before Gen Con, before Kickstarter gets in our hands, everything. Before
we start jamming 1 billion games a day.
So I'm sorry to the Izmir fans who might end up getting shafted a little bit as we have to push the final lore podcast back or whatever. But for now, we're diving in once again to Lyra lore. Before we kick that off, I'm just going to mention, if you enjoy this podcast, the big way to support us here, like, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff. That certainly helps us out a ton. If you shop for other TCGs, we've got a TCG player affiliate link you can use to buy your single cards. That's not relevant for Altered really, but the marketplace won't be active right away. I don't know how TCG players are going to react to things. The marketplace won't be active for a couple months at the launch of the game. So I don't know. We'll see. But the affiliate link is bit.ly/shoptcgs, or you can click the link down in the description below. So thank you all so much for your support and all the ways you do. I'm done shilling. Jordan, I want you to begin. Let's muse a little bit on the Lyra.
All right. So yeah, those of you who don't know, Lyra is generally composed of more artistic backgrounds. They're not limited to this, of course, but that's kind of like their primary forte. They like pouring their heart and souls into art and performance, and all kinds of music and muse and shows, performances. I think I said performances already.
It's
Uh,
expression, right?
yeah,
They're all about expressing and and experiencing the sensations of life.
Yeah, they
It's
like I think the thing they say is they Lyra makes sensation the cornerstone of their values. If they had like the classic like value pillars is sensation and a keystone of their reality, if you will. They're very living in the moment. They like to think about the present rather than the past or the future. They'll draw on those things as inspiration, but they like living in the here, living in the now, taking things as come. They're very not the flighty isn't the word, but they just kind of go with the flow. They're a very nomadic people. Actually, if I remember correctly, their ancestry is from the nomadic tribe, or
the
back not the nomadic tribe, but like back in the nomadic times when there was a bunch of tribes just kind of moving around, surviving. They kind of kept that nomad lifestyle. They are
they consider themselves the last heirs of the
Yes.
tumult nomads.
Yes, very much so. And it kind of works with their lifestyle of being performers as well, because a lot of the clans will travel from place to place in their caravans and do different shows at different areas as it gets developed. They are 9 tribes specifically, all ruled by a matriarch at the helm of each of them and an elder that ensures the respect of their tradition and the memories of their factions and individual clans and how they kind of do stuff, which is cool. I can't remember if they list specifically all 9. They
They
go over
don't.
a few in the stories, and they mention specifically the Lost Tribe and the Exiled Tribe as well. We'll get to those later because that's part of their one of their primary drivers is what they do is searching for those tribes specifically. But so that's kind of a broad overview. So we'll transition into their alteration style, which I found is pretty sick too. Called the I'm probably going to butcher this because I'm bad at pronunciation, as all of you have probably found out.
You can do it,
But
Jordan.
the ignitions,
Ignescence.
ignescence. Okay, I was close on that one. But
Very
yeah, their
close.
alteration style is the ignescence, and it almost seems like the opposite of Bravos, where Bravos is all about just kind of changing the world around and outside of them to shape what they want. In this style, it's more so they draw from their passions and basically their internal feelings, emotions, and passions to help their energy and their mana to manifest, to do their alteration. And they generally do that by harvesting energy, and they'll spark it by performing, or they put it into their art, painting, sculpting, whatever thing that they're doing. They're very passionate and they're very all in. Is what they are described as, because they pour their passion into everything into whatever they're trying to be good at. There's no room for half-heartedly doing stuff. It's all or nothing with them is what it seems like.
What I thought was really cool about this alteration style was this idea that they kind of say they're considered, some of the strongest altars or the greatest altars that exist. Um, but it's like completely fueled by themselves. Not and a lot of us are used to like, you know, role playing game systems, video game systems. You play a mage, you have a mana bar, you you use your mana and it depletes, and then it either recharges over time or you drink a potion or whatever, and you're good. In the world of Altered, the alteration, the ignescence style that the Lyra are using, it draws on their it draws on their own emotion, their own energy, to the point of actually like draining their life permanently. It's like the mana bar, it ain't replenishing here, right? It's like There's
No,
and
it
that's actually a key part of one of the stories that we'll read of one of the exalts that are the heroes in the faction. But um, it's really like when you say all in, Jordan, you're not kidding. It's
yeah,
they will
and
give their life to alter, and they're happy with that. They're like, yes, I have created so much. I have done so much good. I'm happy to go out this way.
yeah, and on that note, the mana bar, if you will, does replenish. It's constantly replenishing. Because one of the features it mentions about the igniscience or ignitions, I already
Ignescence.
forget. Ignescence is it's something that they have to express. It's almost like a survival instinct because if they don't let out the energy that builds constantly, like they call it their inner fire, it'll actually start being detrimental to their health if they don't release it. And they can also, like you said, go the other way. If they do too much, it
Mm,
drains them completely. And I think it describes their skin as becoming like ashy and pale, and they
yeah.
start like really becoming like lethargic and sleepy. But on that note, if they don't perform, if they don't let out their passions as well, the other side of the coin happens, and they also start dying due to over abundance of this energy inside as well, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah,
And
yeah, you're right, and we'll talk a little bit about one of their objectives too, about paramours, which I thought was a that was an interesting like twist to put on it too. This legend that because obviously they're in this perilous position where like yeah, I mean they can go either way, and they're kind of they're forced they're forced to create or they die, create or die is like what Lyra's about.
yeah, and I really liked the when they mentioned the alteration style because it's like it's almost like high risk, high reward too. Because like you said, like there's very serious potential, unlike the other alteration styles where, like they do it, they want to do it, but for Lyra, it is not a I want to do it, I don't. It's you have to do it or you're going to die kind of deal. And that seems very dire, but it also allows them to kind of live this exuberant lifestyle and really achieve their dreams out of necessity almost.
And
Um,
that like I love that you called it to the high risk high reward because that really plays into that that like minor that not even minor just that sub theme of like randomness and gambling
yeah,
that
I was gonna say that
Lyra
was the
has in the
next point.
game.
Is it's really cool how they blended that and attached it to the gameplay as well. And
Yeah.
because of those high highs and those low lows, it makes it not necessarily I was gonna say interesting, but it makes it more um natural that they would be the ones with the highest power gap, like the highest power ceiling, because
Oh,
like they kind
yeah.
of they have all this energy, but that comes at the detriment of like you gotta walk the line or you might die one way or the other if you don't burn it off kind of deal. And you have to do a controlled burn or you'll go the other way and just kind of extinguish your inner fire and then it's over.
And you know what this made me think of too? The idea of the Lyra gameplay wise, mechanically having stats that are often either high numbers or zeros, right? That's like another sort of like another little framing of this motif that they have, another way to kind of frame that idea of all or nothing, high risk high reward, kind of, and that it applies not only to like multiple different facets of their gameplay, but then it like extends throughout their lore as well. That's just that's I I, I I'm very impressed. I'm constantly impressed by how they've developed the lore for the world in Altered. It's I mean it's very deep and it's very well thought out.
Yeah, I love it a bunch. So that's their alteration style. Moving on to the next section is rites and initiation. Kind of how you would join Lyra. Lyra, from what we've seen so far, this one seems the easiest to become a part of. I think it mentions that they very few times where they deny entry. They kind of are all welcoming, all encompassing. They still undergo an initiation rite called the emergence, which I thought this was wild. So in order to do it, because being more pulling from their nomadic roots and the older times, they don't feel like the tumult is this weird thing that has to be abolished. They believe more like it's kind of a reflection of their ability, because a lot of times when they manifest their ability, it feels the same to them, which is something we'll talk about here in a second. Like you said, when they die, they want to just return to the tumult. It it resonated with me a bit more from my personal background because I am Native American, and a lot of it felt a lot of I saw a lot of parallels to the way they described this to like my Native American heritage,
Oh,
as
cool.
far as like the world isn't something, or like the weirdness and destructiveness and dangerousness of the world is all part of one thing, and the idea is you come from that, and then when you die your ultimate goal is to return to that, to kind of like return to what you came from kind of deal. And I thought that was really cool. But kind of pulling it back to this, in order to be initiated, to kind of symbolize that connection with the tumult, one of the requirements, a hard requirement, is you must venture and enter a tumult singularity by choice and let it specifically transform you. You have to be transformed by the tumult. And they do this in a couple of different ways. They generally have an alterer accompany them so it doesn't get too bad, because as we've heard in previous stories, entering a singularity sometimes is fatal and you lose limbs, and not a good thing that you
Often,
generally
I would
want to
say.
do. Yeah. Generally, you don't come out as functional as you came in. So they generally bring an alterer to help mitigate the potential damage. But it said the disfigurations come in all shapes and sizes because it's very dependent on how, like, I guess the alterer that's with you, how severe they count as severe. So sometimes it's something as simple as like their hair color changes, and other times this one it showed a picture of a dude whose entire right half of his body is like a tree ant. So he's like half tree, half like person still.
I wonder if they just like they like randomly assign a known list of veteran alters to you, and you're really hoping you don't get the one guy who like just like makes you stay in forever. Like everyone knows, oh man, like Steve went in with him last week and he came back a goat. Like he will not pull you out. You're like, please give me the girl who will take care of me right away. If anything starts like she went in with Jenny last week and Jenny just came back with blue hair, and I was like, I could do blue hair. Like or maybe they form relationships with certain, maybe it's like a mentor that you have or something. I don't know, but it's just kind of funny to think about.
Yeah, and a lot of them are just cosmetic changes is what ends up happening. But it did say that some of them do end up with supernatural abilities afterwards due to the transfiguration. I think some of the things they had is like you breathe underwater. Some of them have extraordinary long life, different things like that. So sometimes it does come with like an extra special ability or perk.
So you're saying it's a like high risk, high reward thing?
Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, and like I mentioned before, they consider themselves children of the tumult, and they have a high wish to return to it. So one of their big things is being more artistic background. They have one or two things that they generally do near the end of their life. Either they're getting to the end of their days and they know, the end is coming. They voluntarily will just, without anyone with them to like protect them, just walk back into into a tumult singularity to kind of like merge back from whence they came voluntarily, because they're like, I'm done. Another way that they will voluntarily essentially just basically end their life and return to the tumult is I forgot the exact word. It's not in my notes, but they have a word for basically like their magnum opus. As an artist, they basically like make their greatest masterpiece that they will never top in their lifetime,
Hmm.
and they consider that to be like the completion to why they exist. So it's basically like, I have now completed my mission as a being in this world. I am no longer needed here. I am now going to return back to the tumult. I have provided what I need to provide to the universe. My life is complete. I will now bid you adieu. And then they, as well, return back to the tumult and end their own existence,
Yeah,
to return and be reborn later,
you just
which
yeah,
is
you finish, you take a bow, and then you head in. And is there going to be an encore? Maybe. I don't know. Who
yeah.
knows what'll happen in there, but yeah, it's they just call it, they just say achieving the ultimate masterpiece. They don't have a special phrase for it, at least
Okay.
here in
I
what
thought
we
there
were
was a
reading.
special word for it, but yeah, maybe I just had my own head canon about that.
Yeah, you made up your own special word.
And then, of course, each faction has their two, primary objectives that each and every one of them kind of tries to strive for one or both. And one of the first ones here is they really want to find what happened to the other two missing tribes. So there was the Lost Tribe, which was lost before the before Asgard. Is that correct? It's Asgard. I know there's the th.
What as Gartha?
Asgartha. That's what it is. I'm terrible at names. I'll improve, everyone, I promise. But yeah, before the formation of Asgartha even happened, back when everyone was kind of a nomadic tribe, the Lost Tribe just kind of disappeared into the tumult. They just were gone, and no one knew what happened to them. And one of their primary objectives would be like, what happened? Where did they go? Did they literally just fuse with the tumult permanently, and they're just kind of this ethereal essence? Are they still living out there somewhere in the tumult, like just going with the ebb and flow? It's unknown, so one of their objectives is to find out where they are, or at least what happened to them. And then the exiled tribe is one that basically just continued their existence after Asgartha formed, and they're just like, you know what? They kind of were exiled, they're banished, they're just like, we're separating them, and they also just kind of disappeared. No one knows what happened to them. They're just gone. They kind of just, again, like you said, they took a bow, the show was over, and they're just like, peace out, boom. And so one of their objectives is to find out what happened to both of those tribes and just kind of know. I'm assuming, given their background, they probably want to make some homage to them, or like a painting or some history telling of what happened to them. And it probably bothers some of them at their core that they're like, there's a piece of this story that is just untold and unknown, and they have to find it.
That's exactly what I was going to get at. The idea here is, so we had the 8 tribes right away, the 8 tribes of nomads. Then you had 7 because one just got lost, and then the 7 were like met up and they're like, "Hey, let's make Asgartha," and then one of them was like, "Nah," and so they knew where they were. They didn't get lost. They just left, and now they're gone, and now they're lost.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Lyra are the bards, the storytellers, the ones who want to express everything about the world, including the like historians. There's we'll talk a little bit later about the muses, and how I think we mentioned that there's matriarchs in each of these clans, and they are all dedicated to the Greek muses. And there's a muse, if I can even pull it up here, the muse of history, Cleo. There's this attachment of history as a method as an art form, as a method of storytelling. And you can imagine the entire clan that it's devoted to Cleo is probably pretty mad that there's this chunk of their history they just don't have any answer for. It's like, we got to figure this out. This can't just, plus there's people there, and like there could potentially be people still alive, and what are they like now? How they, I wonder too. I wonder if there's like this, they're the ones who are the one with the tumult, right? Whereas like the Lyra have kind of, they feel that connection to it, but like you've got to wonder if they're like thinking, how Lyra are those people now, because they've been living in the tumult for so long. Like I don't know. I get their kind of connection to these people and everything, and their desire to hunt them down and find both different tribes.
Yeah, it's very cool, and it also, of course, being gameplay interested as well, it leaves great openings for future exploration and future sets. Like I could definitely see the Lost Tribe set 4 or something, and it's all about the resurgence of the Lost Tribe as they come out of the tumult.
Are you ready? Are you ready for my wild speculation?
Yeah.
We find one of the tribes, and they're fresh. Like, this isn't a story about we found them and they integrated into society. We found them, and they have an alteration style nobody's seen before, and they're now the 7th faction in the game.
I love new faction stuff. Let's go.
Yeah, it's a possibility. It's a possibility. So, just throwing that out
that'd
there.
That'd be exciting.
Anyway, then, keep going.
So, and then the last point here for our broad overview of the faction is going to be their last objective, which is finding their paramour. The paramour is basically like a soulmate. I'm going to read an excerpt from this just because I feel like it does a good job of explaining it, and it just seemed very good. So I just want to read it in its entirety. So it says, there is a persistent legend, that of paramours, soulmates, capable by their mere presence of neutralizing the harmful effects of the ignitions, by absorbing a portion of its inner fire, or feeding it in return. This is why many Lyra embark on a quest of their own for their other half, so that their creative abilities can be fully expressed without any restrictions.
If anyone has, okay, this is maybe like it's not really spoilers. My Hero Academia, the anime, had a like 3 seasons ago, so it's like I'm not okay, fine, I won't go into too much spoilers, but there's this point where the main character, who has a mega drawback, his ability, he's got the strongest abilities, but he's got a mega drawback where he destroys himself when he uses them. uh it eventually like fights the ultimate final boss, for not the ultimate fight, but gets hooked up with this other character whose ability is to rewind time and replenish. Basically, finds out she could just constantly rewind time on him to replenish his strength, and he becomes a god for a season. Um,
For a couple
and
episodes.
yeah, for a couple episodes. Yeah, yeah.
Not the whole
But
season.
yeah. But that's exactly what I thought of when I saw this. I'm like, I just thought of like the full power. When you get the two together, they can just go wild. And like, I get that desire for that hunt too. I mean, that would be sick. Think of what you could do.
Yeah, I like this mentality too, because normally a lot of times, like in at least Western culture, like the arts or like artists and stuff are generally romanticized a lot. Like the classic romances are always like the more artistic characters find that forever soulmate romance. So I think it's very fitting that one of their objectives is to find their soulmate, because that's very prominent in a lot of artistic
Mm,
cultures and subcultures. Is that everlasting love kind of deal.
yeah.
I mean, everyone's always looking for their soulmate, but it's in a lot of like movies and films and books. It's like love stories and romantic soulmate stories are heavy in that culture.
Yeah, it's
So
it's a it's a very fitting objective to have just for their art focus. I totally agree. I think that's a really good point.
yeah, and
Before we
a
before
lot of great art is also forged in both new love and broken love. So that's
Yeah,
also
true. That every Taylor Swift album and stuff like that. No, but I mean that is a really good point. You did miss one thing that I really want to go over really quick, about iconic locations that they mentioned in this
oh,
overview article.
yes, iconic locations. Totally forgot to put them in my notes because I was like, I'll remember those. They're important. They're very iconic.
You said the same thing last time, I think, doing the Bravos one about something else that we ended up going back. It's okay. I got your back though. I'm
Okay.
just gonna, because I don't want to get too long in this, but I'm just gonna really briefly mention the two things they talk about: the Sahanka, which are basically, so all the factions have like a cool bastion that everyone hangs out at. Like the Bravos had Haven, Axiom had the, oh no, I forgot the name of Axiom's already. Um, Axiom had one too, and it was really cool. It had a big like mining facility and factory in it and everything. Um, so the Lyra don't. They are just, every clan has a Sahanka, which is like um, a building, a palace, a small town, or something that moves with them because they're still nomadic. The one that everybody knows just from the cards so far is the Ouroboros, which is a giant, wild building thing full of scaffolding and steps and ladders going every which way. I like kind of imagine an MC Escher like stairs painting inside there. Um, that has this big stone snake that constantly rotates around and chases its own tail, thus the Ouroboros. And inside there's like a well-known casino. that people hang out in, but it's a big one because it's the
It's
one
much
that
bigger than I thought it was gonna be. Like, based on the picture and the art, I was like, yeah, that probably houses, a fairly huge crew. But in the description, it specifically says that it accommodates thousands of nomads, and I was like, that thing is more massive than I thought it was. I thought the like mountains behind it were just like smaller hills, maybe, or they were off at the mountain was off in the distance. But that thing is massive.
yeah, it's really big. And I don't know if any other Sahanka fly. It might be the one flying one as far as we've heard. Um,
I
but it's
feel
really
like
cool.
the one that we'll hear about later flies. It doesn't say whether it does or not. Its description makes it seem like it's flying.
If you're talking about the one in the Nevenka story, I think its description makes it sound like it's on the ground. But
Oh, I thought it made it sound more
I
like it
think there's
was
a
in the
descriptor
air.
of tread tracks from it. So, but yeah, we'll talk about that in a sec. The other thing I want to mention, and these aren't really referenced in the stories at all, but this one just caught my interest in particular, is the Kalan May,
Yeah,
which
these are cool.
yeah, I just thought this was really neat. It says once per cycle, the Lyra are called to some location somewhere. If they choose to answer it, they gather at basically a big a big party. They just have a big old party celebrating the Kalan May. It's a festival dedicated to art, and they are just having fun, showing off art, dancing, circus, singing, and all this energy gathers in this one place, and it just all coalesces into literally a wonder of the world. It just creates the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, basically. Just some like gigantic thing just forms from all of their combined energy. And they named a few. They said there's the reversed waterfall. Sorry, the reversed waterfall of Koivar. I didn't practice these ones. The Olive Grove of Sartonis, the Alabaster House of Ser Karan, or the Valtrecht Centaur, which with that one I imagined like the Colossus of Rhodes, like just some like gigantic centaur statue or something. Um, which is that's I just thought like that one just caught my interest. I just thought that sounded kind of neat that they just every year or whatever they wander somewhere and they have a party and some ridiculous thing is created in their wake, almost accidentally.
Yeah, I thought that was really neat too. It reminded me, like you said, of the thing very vaguely of like Burning Man, where there's
Yeah,
just like nothing in the
right.
desert. There's this big festival, and then there's like a billion like monuments, and then there's this huge one at the end. With the only difference being the Lyra ones don't get burnt to the ground afterwards.
Right, right. But yeah, so that won't really matter too much. But the Sahanka, those will come up in the stories. So it was good to know. But there should be 9 of those moving around all over the place for the 9 different tribes.
With 2 that are hidden somewhere.
No, that sorry, 9 clans. The tribes aren't the Lyra clans. The tribes are just the original people,
Oh,
and
right.
the
Yes.
tribes the tribes have become the current people, but
Clans.
they're spread. I think in the different they're spread into the different factions that we have today.
Gotcha.
Um, so the remaining tribes are just the lost and the exiled tribe are still just out there just chilling.
All right. But yeah, so that is the broad overview. So as usual, now we'll jump into the 3 specific heroes and their backgrounds and stories. Today we're gonna start with Nevenka and Blotch being the first Lyra hero that was revealed. So I think it's fitting that we start off with it. It'll be so this one's a little different than the other stories we've read.
It
So we're gonna
sure
be upfront.
was.
It's gonna be kind of quick, mainly just because we'll get into why, but it's also written in a very different way. If anyone out there has read them, you'll know what I mean. But it's instead of being written like a normal novel, it's written as though the character herself is like telling you the story. So there's a lot of weird like I forget what the word is for it, but like a lot of weird like sentences or sound effects or like different things as though it's narrating the character telling you stuff. I know there's a
Yeah.
specific word for that, but I'm just not
Uh,
knowledgeable of what it is.
I'm not sure exactly what to call it other than I felt like a almost like a Deadpool, like if that's an appropriate comparison, like not, I would not quite like fourth wall breaking, but it definitely was as if, you were the reader and she's talking directly to you. She can't, she's screwing around the whole time. She may be telling the truth and she may not about the whole thing too.
Yeah, a good way to think of it is like reading it was like listening to a opening cutscene in a video game where it has a character voiceover explaining what's happening rather than like a scene playing out.
Sure.
The biggest vibes I got, which I think a lot of people will if they read it, is it's like if Harley Quinn was telling you a story of what happened in a Batman episode, kind of deal. Like
Yeah,
it's
that'd be
basically
fair.
like that vibe. But anyway, so to get into the story, Nevenka and Blotch. So like I said, this one will be a little bit weird. I'm going to give you more cliff notes just because there's a lot of fluff text in this one that isn't really lore bits. It's more just Nevenka kind of conversating with you. So what I can glean from this story, assuming Nevenka is telling any bit of truth, because in the end she alludes to maybe just making most of it up, is she is a little off her rocker. Self-proclaimed. She says she's in the ladder as far as the different types of people. She's the one who might have a few screws loose in her head. She mentions that. She rolls with a gang, and kind of she does a lot of graffiti tagging, as you could guess from her character art. But not a lot of the kids or people around her or who know her in her clan want to be her friends because she says by her own admission that they're all scared of her. So instead, her gang is comprised entirely of Eidolons that just kind of hang out with her and do stuff. She mentions a few names, but outside of the names being dropped, they never get explained as to any description as to what they are. If they're human, if they're Eidolon, you assume they're Eidolon because of her later saying that only Eidolons hang out with her. But you don't know. We it's anyone's guess actually. It's She was born within the Mist, which is a Shahanka of the Osonian, or let me retry, Osonoya clan.
You did it.
I've done it.
Maybe Asanoya. I think I'd say Asanoya, but
Asanoya. And
close.
then
I could be wrong too.
yeah, the Asanoya clan. Also it was called the Mist, and it threw me off at first because I thought she was just talking about some mist that was there, but the actual place is called the Mist, from what I can glean, unless she's lying, and it has a different name.
That's the big
But
that's the big caveat to this entire story. That's true unless she's lying, which she could be.
yeah, so she does also name drop another friend who we know isn't an Eidolon, or no, it is an Eidolon, which is Loki, because Loki is not a fictional character, so it has to be an Eidolon. Loki is one of
Well,
her.
the Loki we know in the community manager for Altered, he's real. I've met him.
Oh yeah, he's the
But
in-game Loki that we've seen. The card is
you know,
derived from the trickster. I'm pretty
she
sure.
could be referring to either one though. It's not totally clear.
You know, you're not wrong with the almost Deadpool-esque fourth wall stuff. That they could literally be talking about the developer Loki.
that'd be the best. That'd be so awesome.
But yeah, so she mentions them being part of the crew, and then they go over the Mist, which is said to have mighty chimneys, um, swirling in the clouds, which is why I think it's floating, maybe,
Nope.
or maybe it's just really tall.
So
It says
later on,
it has dizzyingly tall ladders.
yep, it's just really tall. But later on, it says, watching the metal colossus continue its journey, leaving deep caterpillar tracks in the ground.
Okay.
So, I mean, again, unless she's lying. So who knows?
True. And I guess she could be exaggerating because the part we'll get into next is she sees, as she's just kind of chilling around in the Mist, doing what she does, tagging stuff. She's banned from a lot of establishments due to her mischievous nature and, basically vandalizing everything by putting different art on it. by either painting or spray painting different artistic flair onto it. She sees a colorful swirl swirling amongst the smokestacks, and she gets basically like, or again, by her own admission, is just entranced by this, and she's just kind of following it, and then she starts chasing after it as it's going through. It says she's like going past guardrails and like basically like red tape that's like, hey, it's dangerous to go past this. Please don't jump onto this railing kind of deal. Um, and she's just like bypassing all those to try to get to it and just follow this interesting swirly line that ends up being a dragon described to be made of inky liquid, almost paint like, as it's swirling around with its iridescent colors. Again, she's just entranced. She's following it. She goes past some areas. There's some negligence on her part because some of this red tape, she claims it's not her fault, but based on the description, you can infer that there was plenty of like, hey, it's dangerous. We need to fix this area. Don't go here. It's unstable. She goes there anywhere, and a rusted panel falls through, and she kind of just falls. What they describe as a very dangerous, well, she describes it as a dangerously long fall. I think she describes it as she's falling into the void, flirting dangerously, and she thinks that maybe she's probably going to die. And this dragon of paint just kind of flows down and slows her fall gracefully to the ground to make sure that she doesn't die, and kind of grumbles at her. She takes the grumbling as something along like, fair maiden, are you okay? But we all know it was probably just like, what, why did you do that? Like, what are you doing? Come on.
You dumb idiot.
Yeah, so she sees this and she immediately is, enamored with the thing. She's covered in paint, and she vows, by her words again, to repay this debt, this life or death debt, because you saved my life and I must save you in return. So she vows to follow him forever and make sure that she can save his life and pay it back. And along this adventure, it's obvious that this dragon is trying to lose her, and she continually persists and pushes through mountains and treacherous terrain, has to be saved numerous times, uncountable amount of times, by this being. Spoiler alert, is Blotch, as you guys probably are guessing based on the description of a dragon made of iridescent colored paint.
But what's his real name?
But yeah, so after a long while, Blotch begrudgingly is like, you know what? Some of this was to test you, to kind of test your perseverance. Basically, he was trolling her, from what it seems like, where he was just like, what is she willing to do to follow me? Like, let's just see what's going to happen if I go over here. Is she going to jump across this ravine? Who knows? But once he finally decides, you know what? Fine. She's past the test. He reveals his name to her, and his name is not Blotch. It is Kutrabalamash Blotcharala, or Blotchara.
I'm not even going to try to correct it.
It's a huge word. I'm going to try it one more time. One sec. Give me a quick second to think. I've tried it like 4 times, and every time I've said it differently. Let's see. Kutrabalamesha Blotchara. I think that's the closest I've ever been.
Kutrabala Masha Blotchara.
Yeah, so that's his actual name. And then it says that it's translated as sun lance fragmented through sublime iridescence of celestial waves.
What?
But Nevenka only registered it as Blotch. So that is what she started calling him, and it just kind of stuck. So he is now known as Blotch. And Blotch, I also found this interesting. Again, this could be a lie, but I feel like this part is probably, if anything is true, this is definitely the truth from what we've seen, which is interesting because normally the Eidolon is a pair, or, the completion of an alterer. But in this case, it seems more like Blotch is the mainstay here, and Nevenka is the sidekick. And actually, at one point, it says Blotch made Nevenka his sidekick, or tolerated her presence like a dog forgets about a tick, as he likes to joke. Which I thought was just hilariously fitting. So in this case, from this story, we don't actually know what happens. It just kind of says that they go on adventures and doing all kinds of interesting stuff, and then eventually Blotch proposes to Nevenka in a grand act of union. And then she has kind of a panic and is like, I don't do that. I'm like the master of everything. I can't be locked down by marriage. And then basically says that they just kind of continued, and she's the goddess of making fabrication, mystification, inaccuracy. So basically at the end it's like, by the way, did you believe any of this earlier nonsense? So the whole story could be a lie. Like I said, I'm pretty sure the Blotch being the mainstay and she's really the sidekick is probably the truest part. But everything else is there. There was a small mention of her parents. I forgot to mention that in the beginning, but again, it's very in passing and just as like the classic tragic. My mom didn't love me and my dad abandoned me, and that's literally all it says. Is like something to that effect. It was like, yeah, that's it. Move on. So that's the story, question mark.
I think what we can get from this story is we can gather her character for sure from the story.
Yes.
She's free-spirited, unpredictable, not a rule follower. She's not so interested in, I think, what's true in the world, but she's interested in what feels right in the moment. I think what she really symbolizes in Lyra is everything you talked about right at the beginning of your Lyra discussion. Um, really, focused on the present, focused on living right now. Rules are just things that get in the way of you achieving your goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where some of these other Lyra we're going to talk about are really about uh, formal art, performance, creation of what everybody views as quote art. Um, Nevenka is really just about the raw emotion and sort of just like unpredictability, capricious nature of being in the Lyra faction.
Yeah. Kind of embodies the life is a journey and that journey is the art piece kind of deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say that. Yeah, it's going to be interesting, I think, to if we continue to see, what she's going to come up in the next story, but she's told from a reliable narrator's point of view, which I think gives us the most information we can get about her, because I think consistently Nevenka in this lore and then any other lore we get about her, whether that be related to individual cards or whatever, I think she'll continue to take this role of an unreliable narrator. And for the people who like to dig into these characters and try and figure out, the deep cut lore, they'll have quite a puzzle with Nevenka to try and figure out exactly what is actually true and what actually happened. Because I'm I'm fairly confident she and Blotch didn't get married and have half human, half dragon hybrid kids.
Yeah.
Make a fortune and squander it on a rabbit farm to make cheese in the alpine pastures. That part just feels a little far-fetched to me. But yeah, that's Nevenka and Blotch. It's a hell of a story. Let's move on to a little bit more of a grounded story. So Fen and Crowbar is who I'm going to have the pleasure of covering in this episode, and I think I don't know, I like both this and the Auraq and Kibble story quite a bit. I was going to say it's my favorite one, but actually I like them both a lot. This is one of our tragedies that we get to cover as we so often get to cover in altered stories. Fen and Crowbar. Fen was an Ouroboros clan member, a a woman who cared quite a bit about the life and lives of everyone. And the story begins with her finding a bird who is struggling to stay alive. Knows that there is a clan member who cares for the birds. They send pigeons, I guess, to send messages. Um, and knows that she can take this bird to the clan member and he'll help the bird. Birchad was his name. Will help the bird, get back to life. So um, she brings this bird in to because the Ouroboros is currently parked. I guess at this moment they're parked somewhere like they sometimes do. She brings the bird in, gives it to Birchad. Notices everyone's kind of acting weird. I was reading this the whole time reading. It's like I know what's about to happen. Everyone's like got somber looks. They're letting her get away with stuff. Um, she then they Birchad then says you need to go see your family right away. She heads over there and finds her grandfather, who was the shepherd of the clan, kind of the not the matriarch, but one of the leaders of the clan, um, had passed away. Um, and what's interesting about this is that, like, obviously that tears her up, that tears everyone up. He was well loved, well respected member of their community. It's like losing everyone lost a family member when that happened. But what became really interesting about the story was that it immediately then turns into like a political drama kind of thing, where what happens from this is that with the shepherd gone, they need to elect a new leader for the clan, and the Kasirga clan, which is the name of the clan that lives in the Ouroboros, decide to put forth Esmeralda, the eidolon of the character from the stories. Hunchback of Notre Dame is what many of us know from the Disney stories, but Esmeralda is put forth as a at this point she's been around for a long time. She's very close with Fenn's grandfather, and she's also a well respected member of the Kasirga clan at this point. So they say, okay, we should have Esmeralda be the leader, and they bring it to the discussion with the other clan leaders, the other matriarchs, and they basically refuse. They say you can't because it has to be a human based on our traditions of the Lyra. It must be a human clan member. It can't be an eidolon. It can't be an imaginary being. Um, and that ends up causing a lot of turmoil. The Kasirga clan elders get back and they discuss everything, and they're basically given an ultimatum. It's like, no, you have to elect a human, or you can no longer be a part of the Lyra. And the elders discuss and they decide, no, Esmeralda's the one. She's the choice, and we will leave to have her be the shepherd of the Kasirga clan. So this ultimately causes the Kasirga clan aboard the Ouroboros to be cast out, and Fen takes this very hard. Actually, Fen really respects the history of the clan and what they represent, and the history of the Lyra. And Fen is well aware of the what's called the Song of One. The Fen, a singer herself, as well, is aware of the Song of One, which was the song that all of the Lyra clans originally sang together to create some sort of, I think, to create some sort of like alteration to save humanity at an early time from the tumult. Um, so no, she knows of this sort of this epic ballad, this way of bringing forth the power to create a life changing, world saving alteration. And she knows that when the clans are not together, they can't sing the Song of One. Um, and its words are lost at this point. The Song of One isn't even known anymore, but it's really just like it's kind of like a myth at this point, and nobody's willing to listen to her when she tries to argue it and say, well, if we're cast out, then I love Esmeralda too, but if we're cast out, then we're not going to be able to be together when we can once again find the words and sing the Song of One. But they just don't believe that that's important. They don't believe that that's a necessary thing. So the Ouroboros leaves, and the whole clan decides to set course for Arcaster, which, if you'll remember from the last week's episode with Bravos, was this capital city, where Kojo and Buddha were running their doing their alteration parkour, basically. And it's of course a big urban center, very different than what Fen is used to, living her nomadic lifestyle, hitting up various small villages, countrysides. So they get there and they park, and a number of the members of the clan have to just kind of get used to living this urban lifestyle, including Fen. But she found some things she enjoys. She got the band together, right? There's some of her friends. They founded a little band, um, including a chimera who joined them named Crowbar. It doesn't even say where he came from. He's a pumpkin headed dude who plays the guitar. He's rad as hell, and he's part of the band. Um, so they just start playing around Orcaster, and they're awesome, and everybody loves them. And they just kind of live their lives that way. Um, and Fen ends up like really developing her gift for alteration to the point where she's able to improve their performances by bringing eidolons such as Mozart, Duke Ellington, Debussy, Estrellita Castro, Fred Astaire, Ravel. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not actually super familiar with some of the names here, but I am very familiar. I know some of these for sure too. And they just they really hit it off. They get like super popular, and they're just performing around and just kind of killing time that way. And eventually, one of these performances, she meets up with Nevenka. And so here's where I think we get the most true information about Nevenka that we've had. Nevenka was expelled from her clan. She had her chimera Blotch with her, and being expelled from her clan, she decided she's just going to head into the tumult. Why not? The two of them hit it off despite being very different. They were almost polar opposites. But I think, when you're in the Lyra, you get used to the interesting lives other people lead. And I'm sure that's, you just get to kind of vicariously live it through them, or at least just be happy for them. They get to talking about why Nevenka had decided to join these exploration forces and head into the tumult. And they talk about it, and Fen explains her clan situation and how Fen has dreamed of finding the Song of One, because she knows if she can find this forgotten song and show it to her clan, she can maybe finally express the importance of rejoining the Lyra, and they can maybe deal with the political drama and figure it out. And Nevenka says to her that, well, you should just be an Exalt too then. You should join me. You already have Pumpkinhead. You already have Crowbar following you around. And you're going to leave anyway at some point. So you might as well just join the expedition, which sounds, gives us an idea of her actual like thought processes too. And it sounds pretty Nevenka as well. And then gets the idea that, well, like, here's the thing. So the muses are followed by all the matriarchs, and several of the muses are daughters of a Greek figure, goddesses. I'm not sure if goddess is the right term. It's been a while since my classical mythology class, but Mnemosyne, who definitely had children with Zeus. Some of the muses are children of Zeus, but I can't remember what rung, if she's a human, demigod, god, but she's part of mythology. Um, and Mnemosyne is, oh, it says right here, she's the goddess. If I read one more line, so they call her the goddess here. So there's my answer. Um, Goddess of memory and mother of the muses. And the thought process being, find Mnemosyne. She is, as the goddess of memory, is incapable of forgetting anything, right? So she surely would either know where the song is or the actual song itself. And if she needed to get these clans together, the best person to talk the clan some sense into the clans is going to be the mother of the muses that the clans all follow. So it's a pretty reasonable plan, all things considered. And they decide that's it. That's the plan. Though, and right at the last moment, the wind, who the Ouroboros love to follow since they have the flying trip, the flying ship, the wind blows through the window as they decide that this is the idea, and Fen knows that the wind has their back too, and so presumably they set off, and with Fen's goal of finding the Song of One as her driving force.
Right.
So I like I like this. I like the story. It's pretty grounded. It's not terribly tragic, which is good. It's got a tragedy that we can all relate to, I think. But it's not like some of the other stories where like everyone I love was murdered or became a stink bug or something. It's
Became a worm.
yeah, became a worm. Exactly. It's just, she has a pretty good goal. I did like the little bit of political intrigue. I wasn't expecting that in a Lyra story, especially after Nevenka's story. I didn't know what to expect. And I love that Pumpkinhead is just he's just there and he's just vibing and he's just cool. I love his art. I'm looking at his art here right now. It'll be on the screen for you too, but this dude just rules. How can you be mad at Crowbar? He's sick.
I love his design. I'm sad that on the character card he's not bigger or like more front and center because he's kind of covered up in
Yeah.
the actual character card. And I was like, oh, he's like the coolest part of the card.
Yeah.
Pumpkin people with a guitar.
You know what he makes me want is like a companion token that has him on it, like Pumpkinhead Man, instead of the I mean, it's very nice little artwork for the companion, but I want my Pumpkinhead guy that I can move around.
Aren't you gonna get one? Because wasn't one of the stretch goals to have the, or was it just the starter deck characters that had the full like unique art on the
Oh, I
stand?
guess maybe I can't remember. Is it unique art for each one, or is it just? I thought it
There
was just
was
the.
there was a stretch goal to have a certain tier of backer, which I think both of us were, where you got like the character specific Eidolon and character, and then they also had the generic ones that just have the like road show tokens that just have the like
Oh shoot!
nondescript thing.
Nah, you're totally right. Let's go. There's Crowbar's face. I see it right here. Let's go. All right. I totally forgot. I totally forgot that was a thing, and now I'm jazzed for it. Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, Jordan, you have any thoughts on that, or do you want to move on?
I thought it was a very solid story. I wish like you, I wish I could have got a little bit more elaboration on Crowbar. He did just kind of, it was just there. It was just like, yo, I play guitar. I'm jamming. I'm here. Um,
I'm
but
sure the
overall,
story is somewhere, by the way. Just like I have no doubt that it's written out somewhere, but I assume a lot of these stories they try and keep them at a certain length, and stuff just gets cut, and we'll get it at some point, I bet.
if anything, they'll probably be at least on the in the app when you scan the card and has all the jazz about it.
I hope so.
It might just link to this story though. who knows? We'll see what happens once it launches.
We will see. Would you like to move on to Auraq and Kibble?
Yes, we will close out the last hero story with Auraq and Kibble. This story is probably the most tragic out of them. It has a very sad thing that happens, but we'll get through it together.
Thanks, Jordan.
Auraq and Kibble, when he was a child, and I can't do W and M's together. Aumar loved the costumes.
Amar.
Is it just Amar?
I would just say Amar.
Okay, I thought it had to be enunciated more. Maybe I was just thinking too hard about it. Seeing the W.
I think you got way too in your own head about that. I think it's just right. Amar.
So as a child, he was born into a Lyra clan with a Lyra father and mother, very deep into performance. His father made the costumes for his troupe. They were like a performance troupe. And his mom actually was one of the main acts that would go on stage and do a performance. It doesn't actually say what kind of performance. That just kind of leaves it to imagination. I wasn't sure if it was singing or dancing or both or something else completely, just that it was a performance. I will say I'm going to leave out a lot of the extra flowery language because there's a lot of very eloquent words that they use to describe some of the performances. Some of them I had to Google and I had never heard of the word before. And I was like, what is it? Like, one of them was like, they're there. You'll read them, but they're like really.
I was hoping to know what it was, and I was hoping it was like some really, really basic thing that you just have never heard of for some reason because you live in a bubble.
Yeah, there's some big words. Let me just for you, Dan. Oh,
thank you. I'll excited
find
about this.
One of them.
Okay.
It was. Let's see, I know it started with a G. That's not going to work. Okay, I'll just come across it when I come across it.
Okay, all right.
Sorry, back to the story. He grew up, he loved helping his dad with the costumes. He loved helping work backstage. He was also very enamored with watching his mom perform. He would sit on the sidelines in the back of the curtain, watching every time she performed. It never got old for him. He loved watching his mom's performances to the point where he started memorizing the entire show from start to finish. He describes it as nothing equaled the joy that he got from watching his mother perform. And of course, since his mom was such a big hit, she gave a lot to these performances. And as we spoke about before, their alteration style gets to the point where if they overextend, it really starts hitting their health and they need time to recuperate. They need their loved ones around them to kind of like feed back into it and kind of resupply them in between stuff. So her health started to decline, and him and his father did everything they could during the recovery time in between shows as they're traveling over the years to really help her out. But as she got older, it was just a fight that they could not win. She was too big into the performances and she never wanted anyone to feel like they didn't get the show that they deserved. So her overall health kept declining and declining until one day it got to the point where there is another performance coming up in a couple hours and she was not looking good. That was the point where her skin was starting to crack. It was getting ashy. She was pale. She was very lethargic, and they knew she could not perform. And if she did, it would probably be the death of her on stage in the middle of the performance. So Anwar was like, yo, he petitioned to the troupe. He's like, we don't need to cancel the show. I have it memorized. I can do it. I know everything. Just I'll perform in my mom's stead. That'll give her some time to recover and she'll be good to go. No problem. So given the time frame, they're like, you know what? We don't got any option. We'll give you a shot. Just go for it. So he did all his makeup. He knew the costuming. They refitted the costumes so they would fit him. And he went on stage and he killed it. He did everything perfectly. The crowd roared like they hadn't roared before. He put on a fantastic show. After the show, he felt so excited and so amped up on the adrenaline of performing for the first time, really, and doing so well. He rushed back because he was also concerned about his mother's health, and he was also excited to tell her, like, that he had done it. He's following in her shoes, and sadly, when he opens the door, he knew the mood had shifted. There were tears in his father's eyes already, and his mom had died during the performance. This filled him with a lot of mixed feelings, most of it being sadness. He felt extremely guilty because he knew one of his mom's dreams was to basically die on stage. Like, she wanted to perform until her last breath. And he feels like he stole that from her, taking the stage in her stead. He feels guilty because he should have known that her health was declining and he needed to be there, rather than thinking naively that she just needed this couple hours and then she'd be back on her feet. No big deal. So for a longest time, he was kind of down in the dumps. He wasn't doing well emotionally, and he really pushed to be part of the procession for his mom's uh, being returned to the tumult. He had to be there for it, at least there. He had to do something to help give back, and he was racked by guilt. So he goes on the procession, they bring her back, and once they are there and the procession is concluding, right before he's going to turn his back, and as his mom is being returned to the tumult, uh, a chimera, a cat rabbit hybrid, judging by its long ears. Its body was ethereal, and I think it described it like a soap bubble. It was iridescent. It was just like a living, sentient soap bubble in the shape of a cat and rabbit, which I think is a very fitting description. Just kind of appeared, and it walked over his mother's body and came up and kind of like touched him on the shoulder. And almost immediately, everything, all that guilt just kind of melted away. And he almost like he felt the presence of his mom being like, yo, it's not your fault. It had to happen eventually. Like, it's you. You can, don't feel guilty. Continue with what you're doing. Keep my legacy going, is the feeling he got from the touch of that chimera. So with this reinvigoration, he brought the chimera back. The chimera just kind of hangs around for the most part, giving him that extra boost every time he see it, almost like a reflection of his mom. And he starts really focusing in on his performance, and he pays homage to his mom every time. He makes sure to think about his mother before he goes on stage every single time. And as he starts really pouring his heart and soul into this performance, this is when Auraq is born. Basically, his alter ego, in a way, his performance alter ego, which is described as basically the complete opposite of him, where he's reserved in a lot of places. Auraq is the opposite. They're bombastic, out there, taking the stage. She commands everything. As you would expect, I imagine it's somewhat of a drag show, and later on it goes more into burlesque, is what he really starts wanting to focus in. So whenever he becomes Auraq, she commands the stage. She does the most bombastic shows, and he starts getting really famous with this act, and just kind of shoots to the roof. And he always, I think at one point it says, he makes sure to take it back to his mom at all times. He still likes to do his mother's performance, but he also eventually comes to terms with the fact that he needs to do his own thing as well, and that's where he really starts leaning into the burlesque and his Auraq character. Or not Auraq, sorry, Auraq.
Auraq.
Auraq. I think I pronounced it correctly the first time and then kind of shifted into it.
Yeah, you did. You flipped the U upside down and made it an N.
Yeah, so Auraq killing it out there, and one evening he uses his powers of alteration that he's been honing with his performances and forms an eidolon of his mother and has a deep discussion with her, and kind of reconcile isn't really the word, because he had gone past his grief and knew it wasn't his fault, but he still wanted to basically say goodbye because he never got to, because she passed away when he was on stage and didn't get that closure that he was looking for. So he talked with her. They had a heartfelt conversation, and then she went along, and that is it.
Yeah. Um, I really enjoy the direction of this story. The what I think I like the most about this is this idea of taking what Jordan, you and I have been hitting on, this theme that is in Lyra, deep in Lyra, of um high risk, high reward, going all in, like um and this is really hitting on something that I know there are a lot of people today who struggle with, this idea of identity, um,
Mm-hmm.
and how uh, Amar finds, when he almost uses performance as a way to allow him to express an identity that he almost had to repress prior to this. Someone who's everything. Auraq, she is everything that Amar isn't. Um, and Amar, in a very Lyra fashion, just takes the emotion and passion that he felt for his mother and for his mother's performance, and creates, not just altering around him, but alters during his performance himself into who he wants to be, um, who he's felt like he had to keep, you know, locked in. And I just feel like that's a really, really poignant story, and one that I think needs to be told today. So that's why earlier I was gonna say I think Fenn's my favorite story, because I really liked Fenn. Was like kind of a lighter story, even though it had the grandfather passing, but it was just kind of like a fun. I like the bit of Nevenka in there, but then I thought for a second, like, yeah, but I think this is the story that like really is going to resonate with some people, and really gonna mean something to people, and I've I'm saying that about lore for a character in a trading card game, which is
Yeah,
like wild.
I 100% agree. This story definitely tells the story of a bunch of people who just don't feel represented, and it also has that huge link to losing a very close parent,
Mm.
especially like I mean, I haven't had to experience yet, but I know a few people who have, and that that resonance of guilt that I didn't do enough to prevent it from happening is a very potent thing. Even if it was something that was completely natural causes, people in their grief will still be like, "There's something I could have did to save them, and I didn't, and I'm not a good child because wasn't there for when they needed it, even though it wasn't your fault." Like, it happens to a lot of people.
Yet it even has this moment that I think many people, I mean, many people wish they could have, where Auraq, it's Auraq in this case. I was trying to figure out in what persona it was during this time, but Auraq
Yeah,
gets to actually see her mother again and reconcile that sort of with her. Something that so many people would give anything to be able to do. Um, and it's, yeah, I mean, it's the type of closure that we want to have in these situations. And I like that hopeful message, that is the closure that you can have in that scenario as well. I think that's really, really poignant.
yeah,
Frankly, I'm almost tearing up a little right now. I haven't even experienced this personally. None of this stuff have I experienced personally, but like I actually have tears forming in my eyes right now thinking about this. So
yeah. It went into deeper
damn it.
discussion on the like self guilt in it, and I kind of glazed over it because while I was reading it, it was a little heavier to take too, and I was like, I almost teared up myself because uh, getting a little personal. I know that that exact feeling that happens. My mom actually has gone through that a few
Mhm.
times with her mother, and
Sure.
we've discussed that to help her console. And it's the worst feeling to, like, especially for my end too, like not be able to help them because they're so consumed with what they think is their fault. And
Yeah.
like it's a hard thing to go through, especially if you're the one going through it.
Yeah. And ultimately, I mean, I just feel like we have to say it, but it isn't your fault.
Yeah.
I just want to put that message out there. If this has been resonating with anyone, I don't want to leave this on anything. And I think that's part of the message of this story too. And it's just life, and life is unpredictable, like the Lyra. And as it's they want you to keep trucking and be happy, just like Auraq's mom did.
Yeah.
So,
But on that good note, we're gonna transition now to our question, to something a little
yeah,
more lighter.
back to our fun TCG podcast time. That was man, that is a really good story though. It is really boy, yeah.
I debated switching the order of them too, to have Nevenka lasts, so we didn't have the lasting sadness. And we could,
Going
but
straight from Auraq to Nevenka is like, that's such
yeah, I
a
thought it was
shift.
gonna be too head swingy, so I was like, oh,
A
we'll just
real
leave it
tonal
in order.
shift. Yeah, let's get our mailbag question for the day, which is still the same mailbag question from Nestor and Pilgrim, that lore fanatic out there, who now has a website up where he's posting all sorts of lore, good stuff you can check out. But the question that Nestor and Pilgrim has for us about Lyra today is, which of the 9 muses do you think the matriarch of the Ouroboros, um, or of that'd be of the Kasagir, right?
Mm-hmm.
Also, is the voice for? So, which of the 9 muses does this matriarch commune with? And also wanted to say, nice background, Jordan, which is, you finally have the appropriate background for this episode. You've always had the Ouroboros in your background. So I'm gonna let Jordan take the floor on this one. I'm gonna just kind of provide this knowledge for people who are unaware. The 9 Greek muses are many of whom are daughters of Mnemosyne and Zeus. But the muses were said to, so they are, look, they're like goddesses, but sometimes this whole religion got kind of messy. The goddesses is the appropriate term I'm seeing here, but anyway. But there's goddesses that are like higher up, and there's like the tiers to the pantheon, so they're kind of lower. Um, the 9 goddesses, the 9 muses are Calliope, whose attribute is, this is Wikipedia, by the way, but it's good. Calliope, whose attribute is epic poetry. Clio, whose attribute is history. Polyhymnia, whose attribute is mime, which is sick. Euterpe, whose attribute is specifically the flute. No other instruments, just the flute. Terpsichore, whose attribute is light verse and dance. Erato, whose attribute is lyric choral poetry. Melpomene, or Melpomene, I believe. Melpomene, whose attribute is tragedy. Thalia, whose attribute is comedy. And Urania, whose attribute is astronomy. And then I'm just going to point this out. This says citation needed on Christian poetry in later times. And I agree, citation needed. That's an interesting take on the Greek muse. So they basically all represent different art forms, specifically ones that were quite popular at the time, like mime and flute. But so the question again is, which of these muses do you think the matriarch of the Kasagir, who reside in the Ouroboros, is the voice for? Jordan, you have the floor.
Okay. So first off, I have very little knowledge on muses, so I'm going off of the little bit of knowledge I do have, and what we've been told about the world of the game. So, having only knowledge of two of the large clan establishments to kind of go off of, my idea is either it's Cleo or Urania. Urania, because of astronomy. So far, out of all of the clans, this is the only one we know that flies. It's a huge flying vessel which mimics that of, like a celestial body, and one of the symbols for Urania is generally a globe or a compass. Urbos loosely could look like a compass if you're squinting, but mainly just the fact that it's a huge, almost celestial body that's flying around and migrating. So I could definitely see that. But another thing that brought my attention is to Cleo, which is history. And history is a very important art form and storytelling form. And one of the defining features of the Ouroboros itself is it's engraved with thousands of frescoes and bas reliefs. And frescoes are like those large paintings that you generally find in ceilings of chapels and stuff that depict some, fictional or non-fictional large event in history that has happened, or believed to have happened. And then the bas reliefs, according to Google, I had to Google this. I wasn't sure what it was. It's a cloister adorned with statues, which a lot of times large cloisters adorned with statues again tell some sort of story or potential like history of an event or something that had happened. Generally, uh, statue monuments are made in remembrance of something that happened. So my bigger appeal for Cleo is the fact that this has thousands of adornments that, again, they don't tell us what the frescoes or bas reliefs are made after or supposed to be. So I just have to imagine that maybe this vessel is a living history of the clans as a whole, and it depicts all the different major events in the different clan history dating back to time immemorial. So I could maybe see a case for that, but again, there's not a ton of information to really know for sure. But those are my two candidates. Cleo being number one with a high second of Urania. What about you, Dan?
Um, I I really like I really like your Urania pick, actually. Um, I I was really thinking about this from the angle of the idea of Fenn's background in particular. I was thinking, I wonder if they picked Fenn as like this singer who is from the Casagir, from the Ouroboros, and specifically who descended from one of the shepherd of the Ouroboros. Um, and because she specifically, is a singer, I wondered if they were going to ultimately like tie her mission. She's looking for the Song of One, um, and she's going to be talking to, hopefully getting to meet Mnemosyne and having Mnemosyne talk to, presumably starting with her own clan's muse. So I was really looking at maybe Terpsichore for her. Terpsichore or Errato. I think both of those have, again, light verse, lyric, choral poetry. Those are kind of the two that we're looking at here. Um, I think those are reasonable guesses if my line of thinking about kind of where this hero for the clan comes from, and how they're going to like develop that story going forward. So I think those are reasonable guesses. I have an off the wall guess, and where Jordan, you were kind of thinking about all the info that we currently have. I'm really just thinking about where things are going, and my off the wall guess is Melpomene, because Melpomene's attribute is tragedy, and um, that's really, if the story takes an extremely tragic turn at some point, maybe maybe it would fit to have Melpomene worked in as the muse the clan is following. But I don't think that's a good guess. I think that's just like a writer's room kind of guess if you're trying to think kind of in advance about where that's going. Um, But yeah, I think I do like Urania a lot for your guess too. If I had to guess in probabilities, I would say Urania is probably the highest one because they say too that Urania specifically um, wanted to those who are most concerned with philosophy and the heavens would be the dearest to her, and those who she's instructed, she raises aloft to heaven. So really, there's this symbology of going skyward, raising up, and so that would maybe fit with why the faction decided to have a flying um, vehicle that I'm totally blanking on the Sahanka, flying Sahanka in the first place. Because at some point they put that thing together with their alteration. They made the tall spires of Aerolith and everything. So I like Urania the most, but I think your Cleo guess is interesting, and I could see Euterpe or Melpomene also.
All right. Oh, there you have it. Do you got any other last details or thoughts on Lyra or the stories as a whole before we close out?
No. I mean, I think that was a good episode. I think we had an emotional roller coaster today that we took you all on. So thank you so much for joining us for that. Next 2 weeks, the next episode, I want to make sure you all tune in for that one, because that one will be about Muna, and Muna is the best faction. It's objective fact that Muna is the greatest faction. So this is clearly going to be the greatest lore video. I'm really looking forward to that. But that's all I have to say. So Jordan, why don't you give your final thoughts and then take us out of here?
Yeah, I so far I like this one a lot. It had a lot of ups and downs, like you said. I really like the stories, and I'm excited. This is the halfway point. I'm excited for the next 3, including Muna. I don't know if it's the best faction, but it's hopefully going to bring its stories to the table. I'm excited about it nonetheless. So, as the day comes to a close, those were our fleeting thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, and we look forward to chatting with you in about 2 weeks. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.